I really only know one way of doing things. So I better get my act together and learn a bunch of different lenses quickly.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook, presented by Details Interactive. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 46, and today's guest is Devon Pike, who's currently the president of Baggallini. Before we get started, a quick thank you, as always, to Max Brandstetter of the Wow Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. I'm joined today by Devon Pike. Devon is a global leader in the fashion and retail industry with a focus on developing successful customer strategies and launching and growing multi-channel consumer brands. She's currently president of Baggallini, a digital-first handbag brand focused on empowering and enhancing the lives of modern women. She also acts as an advisor to companies including Athena Technology, Athena Consumer, both SPACs, and we're going to talk about a SPAC a bit later, and Piccolina, a children's lifestyle brand. Prior to joining Baggallini, Devon was Chief Merchandising Officer and Head of International Sales at Gap. Early in her career, Devon also held the roles of President of Givenchy North America, CEO for De Beers Diamond Jewelers, and SVP at both Ralph Lauren and Juicy Couture, which is where I met Devon. She's responsible for launching several new business ventures, including Givenchy Retail, Juicy Couture Digital, and the Rugby by Ralph Lauren brand. Devon started her career as a buyer at Filene's department stores and a director at Federated Department Stores. Devon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to see you again.
Same here. That's quite an accomplished career and lots of different brands. Can't wait to dig into that. And it has been a long time since we have seen each other. It was back when you were at Juicy and trying to take that business to its own e-commerce website, if I recall.
That's exactly right. You got it. That was a fun ride.
Yeah, that was it was a good project. I enjoyed getting to know you then, and actually some of the people from your team at that moment in time, I'm still in touch with either on LinkedIn or Facebook, and so that's more than 10 years ago, or probably 10 years ago.
I know.
We start these shows trying to, give the listeners, and one interesting thing about the show is we've got some people that are senior in their careers, kind of like you and I, and then we've also got some folks that are early in their careers, early stage, startup kinds of people, and just getting set up in their career. And one of the things we try to do is give folks 3 kind of key things that they can take back either to their personal lives or their business, and we'll summarize some of that at the end of the show. But give us a quick perspective where you grew up, kind of perhaps how where you are today was foreshadowed in your early years.
I actually moved around quite a bit as a child. So my father was a lifer at Procter & Gamble. He worked for Procter & Gamble for 47 years. So the consumer space was sort of always part of my world. And we started off, I was born in the South in Tennessee, where my father opened the first Pringles plant. Pretty quickly, a couple of years later, moved on to another project where he was a line manager in New Orleans, and then moved up to Toronto for about 5 years when he moved into human resources and got further into the people side of things. 5 or so years later, moved to Cincinnati, where the general headquarters are for Procter & Gamble. And I think it's interesting, you talk about foreshadowing. I actually think the fact that I sort of lived in a lot of different places that were, 1, not New York City and sort of the hub of the fashion world, and 2, different from each other, right? The South is very different culturally from Toronto, and all of that is quite different from the Midwest. I think it actually gave me a pretty good perspective on consumers. But the truth is, I didn't set out to have a career in fashion or retail. I actually was completely not educated about this side of the business or what that could be like. And I grew up wanting to write, actually. and spent a lot of my early years sort of focused on writing and what type of career I could build with storytelling. And that is also kind of interesting to me in the end, because, as a merchant, on one hand, I picked storytelling back up as a hobby, literally writing, but, building product can also really be a story. And the idea of crafting brands and communicating with your customer has been sort of a pretty live thing for me throughout my whole career. I'd say those two probably lent a lot to what I ended up doing with my career.
Well, I want to just build on the storytelling thing because it's a theme or a question that I would have asked, a little bit later, and we'll go through some of the companies that you've been through. But you've had some varied businesses that you've worked for. Definitely some that were on the higher end, diamond companies, and then Ralph Lauren,
Right.
and then something that's more mass, like a Gap, maybe even considered juicy, more mass.
And private label.
Yeah, right.
I've absolutely done mass.
How does the storytelling change depending upon the kind of business that you're working in?
I would back up a little bit and say, you're absolutely right. A lot of very different experiences. And that was quite intentional, actually, because I felt that in order to sort of get the right experience to be an effective leader in this industry, for me at least, it was important to have a bunch of different experiences, both functionally, right? Because I grew up as a merchant, but obviously I've done a lot of things that are not just merchandising. I think the other piece of it was, getting to know a lot of different customers. But when you say, how does the story change? I think one thing that stays consistent about the story is getting in there and learning about what is your relationship with your customer and what value do you provide for your customer. And then that becomes the story you tell. And that is the same thing, I think, whether you're talking about mass product, right, where the story is a lot about timeliness and value. And when you're talking about luxury goods, where the story is more around quality, craftsmanship, and scarcity. But it has to do, I think, with really first getting in there and being a learner and understanding what is the value that can become the story.
Interesting. It's funny, these shows I set out, to have a path of how I want to go through the discussions.
Yeah.
But we're hitting some things, right now that are, fresh in my mind. So I want to stay on that.
Oh.
The storytelling is great. You also brought up something that a recent guest, Kathy Halligan on the show, talked a lot about. She also has had a very varied career, and she talked a lot about intentional change of roles so that she could add to and round out her experience set. So you just touched on that. Maybe add a little color to that if you could.
Anyway, so no, it's funny. I kind of stumbled onto that. Like I said, I found the industry by accident. I was a literature major at Brown, graduating during a recession, and happened to stumble on first an internship at Filene's department stores. And I really had such a great experience working with some people I really looked up to. And I really, I really fell in love with the industry because it was quite entrepreneurial. And here I was, sort of a girl from the Midwest, very humble upbringing. So the idea of sort of being able to build a business with somebody else's capital, right? I wasn't going to go out and raise money and start something myself at that point. It was a lot of fun and really appealing and satisfying to be so connected to culture and people. And I loved the pace. So all those things really appealed. And then I worked at the same department store, Filene's department stores, as you said, for almost 7 years, actually. And thinking, like I said earlier, my father worked for 47 years for one company. I sort of thought, I'm just going to get in the lane with Filene's, and this will be my career. And eventually I will run Filene's, right? Or, move up the line in May Company. And I had this experience about 5 or 6 years in with sort of the first coming, I'll say, of the internet. And the way that really affected the department store industry at the time was it really impacted talent. And so earlier on, we had some great people who suddenly had new opportunities to move into the digital side of things, and new experiences were open to them. And we lost a lot of great talent, and we needed to start doing things differently. So for example, people who are really capable of managing on a selling floor and having the aesthetic to merchandise a selling floor and sort of do all of those things, that became a higher commodity, and we needed to think about breaking jobs apart. And the people I worked for, who I still admire so many of them. I mean, I worked for some of the greats, actually. It was hard to change, right? Because they had one way of doing things. And I sort of picked my head up and recognized, well, I worked at the same company for almost 7 years. I really only know one way of doing things. So I better get my act together and learn a bunch of different lenses quickly if I'm not, if I thought if I was going to be successful. At the time, I remember thinking, gosh, I was very old. I was about to be 30. And,
oh my God.
So old. And so I thought about a couple of ways of doing that. And I landed on going back to business school as sort of the most effective and sort of efficient ways of getting a bunch of different lenses and learning different approaches. While I was there, I stumbled on a concept called the balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard really is another way of thinking about companies based on a portfolio strategy. So the idea was an accounting principle that looked at a company holistically, right? Different metrics, but also different soft elements that they would evaluate a company on. So it became a holistic scorecard. And I thought, well, that's a really interesting way to think about managing and building a career. And so I started to put together sort of a portfolio of experiences. I thought I needed to have working at different size companies, different structures of companies with different customers in different functions, so that ultimately I would have, a little bit, know enough to be credible when it came time to lead people in those different roles and different experiences. And honestly, Mark, the truth of the matter is I did it at the time, again, earlier in my career, was quite ambitious and thought, gosh, I really want to lead a public company. I had a very specific goal to accomplish with this experience I was building. And as I got closer and closer to that, I realized, gosh, there's so many more things I can do with this breadth of experience, particularly now that, as you and I have both seen, the industry's been changing so much. So this diverse set of skills has been really instrumental in building teams that sort of can weather change and be empathetic to each other and really understand each other. Even more so than, I've actually never run a public company, and I don't think I will. But it's been a really amazing experience and has really served me well.
Is it true your first role then moving out of the department store side was into the Ralph Lauren business?
Yes, that's right.
Right. So culturally, I could have my own perception. Pretty different culture, I would imagine, going from, the world of Federated into the world of Ralph.
Yes, definitely a different culture.
And how did you navigate that?
Oh, moving into that culture. Well, I mean, I had a huge appreciation for it. So I'll say, first of all, I knew it a little bit. I've been an associate buyer for Ralph Lauren and a buyer in the collections business back in my Filene's days. I was versed in the culture already. I had a real appreciation for it. I mean, I think Ralph Lauren is quite a genius. I think, he built something that's truly amazing and visionary, and has been able to sustain it over a very long period of time. So my goal in going there was, up until then, I had been, a buyer at Filene's for many, many years. My role at Federated Department Stores was actually quite different. I was on the merchandising side. So I was more on the product building side, particularly men's private label product, and not as customer facing. In going to Ralph, what I thought was, gosh, I really need to understand, both of my prior roles had offered me a lot of flexibility to build a business, right? As a buyer for a department store, you can just change out when you see trends happening, you can chase them, right? As fast as your open to buy can move. And, on the merchandising side, obviously, particularly in mass, I had multiple labels to work with. So if modern things were on the rise up, I could work with my Alfani brand. If it was more of a classic moment, I could go back to the club business. So there was more flexibility, and I needed to understand what it is like to manage from a brand perspective first, right? Be a brand ambassador first. And that was a very different way of doing things. And, when I had looked around at the time, felt that Ralph was probably the best that there was domestically, was very excited to go and take that role. I went first actually to do a business development role, which was more on the strategy side, leveraging, what I had learned in my prior experience, primarily at business school. And then had the great opportunity to run into Ralph in the hallway one day and start to get to know him over a period of time. And about, a month later, he invited me to come to a meeting about a brand he was sort of concepting in his head. And that's how I actually got my first big break, which was launching and running the rugby business for him.
That sounds like a Friends episode, Devon.
I mean, in theory, it kind of was. I mean, I could see that.
I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm thinking of Jennifer Aniston in the elevator where Ralph Lauren, gets on.
Well, she has much better hair than me. No, but seriously, yeah. I mean, it was a really lucky accident, honestly, that I kept running into him in the hall. But I think the learning there is, again, it goes back to that theme of storytelling, right, Mark? Because, each time I saw him, I had a little bit more to tell him about who I was. So by the time we got, a month in, I had said, here I am, I'm Devon. I'm working on the strategy side for your licensed businesses. I'm Devon on the buying side. I'm Devon. I've worked on the product development side. I'm Devon. I've worked in denim before. I've worked with a younger customer. And sure enough, the idea he was thinking about was targeting the brand towards a younger customer and required sort of the first vertical initiative in the company, vertical being both developing product and then being in charge of selling it and concepting the business to the customer. It was really fortunate, actually, that I had the chance to talk to him about that and sort of repeat the story in a way that he could remember it.
Any digital opportunity there, or was your first digital opportunity really when you got to Juicy?
Let's say my first real digital experience was Juicy, for sure. I had exposure there, though. And again, I mean, that was one of the great things about being part of Ralph Lauren, because he had his hands in many different, early stage innovative businesses. So there was a lot of exposure in that company. We built the rugby business, but at the time, Ralph Lauren was partnering with MSNBC on their digital business. And so contractually, they really just had the Polo Ralph Lauren brand. And we felt strongly rugby was a separate label. So it shouldn't have gone underneath the Polo Ralph Lauren site. It needed to be its own site because it was a different customer that we were targeting. So we waited out that contract and didn't launch that business online until about 4 years after we launched the first store. And in doing so, again, I was much more of an ambassador for the brand and worked alongside the digital team. But, there was a very expert digital group that built that business. But I was lucky enough to learn from them and then use that later when I was invited to run the digital business for Juicy.
And so, leaving a business like Ralph, oftentimes, and I think I referenced, Kathy Halligan before, her comments to me about, a career was, go towards something, don't go away from something. And so in your case, tell me about going towards Juicy and what that was going to do for you in your mind.
Yeah, no. And I think that's a really great way to phrase it. So when I moved over to Juicy, it was a couple opportunities. Like I said, I built, the rugby business, which was retail specific lifestyle brand for Ralph. And I think we had opened 12 stores at the time. Juicy was a much larger retail business, but also founder run still. And Liz Claiborne had just invested in them, and they had just hired their first CEO, Edgar Huber. So I came on at a time where there was quite a bit of investment going into the expansion of the Juicy brand, primarily on the retail side. And I came in to run retail. And for me, right, to the point you just made, so a much larger retail business, but still brand focused with a very specific customer, and building out a founder vision who were still part of the business. So all felt very connected. And then I also knew a couple of different things. One, it was then my first opportunity also running the off-price business, so the outlet business, which was, again, quite a large and very quickly growing business for Juicy, very profitable. And also I had known from my conversations that Juicy was bringing the digital business back in-house. So I was very interested, actually, in taking on the merchandising side of digital with my retail position. And the other thing I knew from my talks with Juicy is one of the places they were planning to invest is the international side of the business. They wanted to build a travel retail business. And I had not worked on the international side before. So again, the things I was going for were One, I could see the opportunity. Two, larger retail business and more expansive, including off price, more expansive, including digital merchandising, and then also the opportunity to start to educate myself on running an international business. I didn't know that later I would move over and run the whole digital initiative. That was not in the game plan, but it was, again, another really happy accident for me.
Yeah, I love the way you've been, very thoughtful, about your career and the roles that you have taken. I think that's, a good point for people that are listening, that you can be thoughtful. In some cases, things just happen. But in your case, it certainly seems like you have, set a target and gone after it. So that's great. Congratulations. Do you have a direct-to-consumer business? I enjoy connecting with guests on this podcast because it reminds me what I love to do: strategic and tactical consulting for businesses like yours. If you'd like to speak with me about your business and see how you can add a fresh set of eyes to your team, contact me at mark@detailsinteractive.com. Now, let's get back to the marketing playbook. So then you get a call that I can imagine most women are going to want, not to be sexist by any stretch, but diamonds are a girl's best friend. And somebody calls you about a role at De Beers. Tell us about that.
Yes, that's right. No, that was great. Francois Delage, actually, another big mentor of mine, was that phone call. I thought of it a little differently, going from $60 tracksuits to $8,000 average ticket diamonds. That was pretty fun. But again, it went back to, this game plan I had for myself, Mark. I had not had a true luxury experience. So the opportunity when I got the call from Francois really appealed and really fit. I will say it was the first time I felt like I left Juicy Digital before I was completely done. But the opportunity was so good to go to De Beers and work with Francois. So there were a few different things about it that really appealed to me. One, like I said, working with a true luxury consumer, which was a very different cadence of business. And I was lucky because De Beers, what they were looking for is somebody who had fashion experience and building out sort of a lifestyle retail culture, which I had then done twice, once with Rugby and once with Juicy, and bringing that experience into the diamond business, because the fastest trending portion of the fine jewelry business at that time was what they would call more the fashion jewelry business, call it diamonds and fine jewelry that retail between $1,000 to $15,000, either for self-purchase or gifting. The pace of that business was very different than the traditional businesses in particularly diamonds, which are engagement, right? So that's one very specific sales cycle. And then high jewelry, which is really fine, 50,000 and up type purchases, primarily in the millions of dollars. Those two have a very different cadence in a fashion day in, day out business that's transacting in the store. So came in to build a culture around that. And it was just a tremendous opportunity to work with a different product category, totally different customer, again, totally different company structure, because that was a joint venture between De Beers and LVMH. So two, really remarkable brands. And then the other thing that was really neat, and I know you and I have talked about this before, is it was the moment that fine jewelry was starting to open up online in digital. And I had just been working on the Juicy Digital business, and it was really exciting to think about being on the forefront of the fine jewelry business in the digital space as well, especially with a name that was so credible, right? De Beers.
Sure. It was probably the first business that you were in where you didn't run a friends and family event.
That may be true.
It's funny you talk about high end and diamonds and high end jewelry. I remember very early on I had a friend on the IT side of the Blue Nile business, and he was explaining to me what Blue Nile was, and I was so wrong, because I remember saying to him, diamonds online, people are going to make that kind of a blind purchase, like that, and do it online, and obviously, that's become a big way for people to certainly research, find jewelry, and then actually to make purchases. So And then, at a moment, sometime into the future, you go to Gap, which is, now, kind of circling perhaps back to, some of the similar types of brands that you were before, very different than fine jewelry. Explain your role at the Gap. It was in Gap brand.
Yes, I joined Gap brand. I had two roles at Gap, actually. I started at Gap in 2015, and I was the head of international. And so I ran all the businesses outside of the US, which were the direct business for Japan, the direct business for Europe, and then the franchise business, sort of rest of globe. And then we also had a venture going in China. That was really fun, although didn't report to me, but was so exciting because at the time China was on a fast clip. And I did the international role for about 10 months. And again, that was just a fascinating role for a couple different reasons. One, the combination of all the different cultures and how those businesses could work together, right? I had, businesses that had a really sort of much more fine appreciation for the Gap brand outside the US, right? And domestically at the time, the Gap business was very much a promotional discount type business. But outside in the US and Japan and Paris, even France, it was quite a refined approach to the business. And so we were able to bring sort of a different level to the brand and then share that back to the domestic business, which was exciting. At the time, it was a really big learning experience about, everyone was talking about what does it mean to be global? That was very topical at the time. And the learning, I'd say, that came through loud and clear was to be global means to be hyper local. And you have to get really in and understand your customer very well. And the customer is not the same from region to region. So the customer in Japan at the time did not have exactly the same appreciation for body conscious clothing that the customer in the US did, for example. And so we were missing, as a Gap brand, a whole opportunity for a wider silhouette that, only came through by getting on the ground in Japan and learning with the team in Japan where the opportunities were. Same thing, our Europe business, we were reimagining what Gap could be. And we had gone back to the vintage approach from a global standpoint of blue jeans. But the truth of the matter is, when you're in Europe, the best-selling color in denim is black. And we had edited all the black jeans out of the assortment. So, spending time in Europe on the floor with the customer, realizing, every second customer is asking for a black pair of jeans and we have none. Right? We were able to add things quickly back to the assortment that really mattered to these customers. And so as a result, about 10 months later, with all these assortment refinements in my regions, I ended up going over and running global merchandising and sort of taking that more localized approach to the global merchandising piece. So two different roles, international and then merchandising. And that, frankly, Mark, I got to tell you, was sort of the dream job. I don't know about you, but I grew up, Gap was my band, right? All through middle school and high school. So to, come full circle and be the head of merchandising for Gap, I would say kind of the pinnacle for me. I felt very lucky.
Great brands that you've worked in, and we'll come up and talk about your current one in a bit. There's always things that are hot in our space. There's two that are out there. I'd love to get your point of view. One is about marketplaces and the building of marketplaces for brands. What do you, when if somebody starts talking about that with you, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that's a new horizon. I think it's very exciting, frankly. It unlocks a lot of opportunities on both sides of the fence, right? Because I think what I found is, even in the online business, when you approach, a channel partner, right? Everyone's still constrained based on the partner's vision of your brand, as well as their open to buy constraints. And so the marketplace opportunity, in my opinion, is excellent because, one, it releases the pressure of open to buy and starts to open up the universe of what can be shared with a brand's loyal customers, right? And then the second thing for the brand side, I think, is just the access to meeting and understanding the potential of different customer types in different environments, right? So the idea that, I could put my entire assortment up online with, the Target customer today or with the Walmart customer today via marketplaces, and they may each choose very different products or respond to different things based on the community that exists. So I think it's an opportunity to learn a lot about brands too, right? I mean, I'm going to access many more customers through those channels than I'll be able to just independently in my own e-commerce universe.
Yeah, just yesterday, Bed Bath and Beyond, made a big announcement about their foray
Hmm.
into marketplace, and it really shot their stock up. But it just seemingly,
Yeah.
and you talk about it from a merchant's perspective, expanding the open to buy. Many of the people that I talk to about this don't quite think about it that way in the expansion of open to buy, but in bringing more products, widening the customer assortment, not taking responsibility for inventory, not having to ship product directly to the customer because somebody else is shipping it on their behalf.
Right. It's a very efficient model for the wholesaler, for the
Absolutely.
retailer rather. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then, one of the other, big things right now is kind of this resale, circular economy, sustainability. Have you, thought about any of that for businesses that either, we'll talk about the SPAC in a bit, but, is that something that's on your radar as well?
Of course. I think it's on everyone's radar in a couple different ways, Mark. Honestly, I think, as a consumer, I find it very interesting, the accessibility, but it's really changing the game, right? So if we think about it, one of the biggest issues I think with our industry is the amount of waste we create, right? We're part of an industry where ultimately we know we're going to make some mistakes. So we give ourselves the ability to overbuy things or present more than we need of things. And ultimately, there's just a lot of waste, right? There's lots of duplication as people compete with each other. I think systems that allow us to be more refined in our approach to eliminate waste are really important. And then I think this idea of having a secondary market to continue to extend the life of some of these products is really important, right? And starts to take things beyond the world of trend, but to accessibility. I think it's also really changing sort of the message of brands, right? Because there are brands now where they were completely inaccessible to certain customers. And now in the secondary market, there's much more access to designer brands, product that used to be very scarce before. And so I think it's going to push all of us to a place where all products need to really provide much more functionality and innovation and value to customers, and can't just trade on their brand name. I think it'll be a very healthy inclusion in our market.
Okay, good. So marketplaces and circular economy, good comments. Thank you. Let's talk about quickly, what is a SPAC?
A SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company. Yes, that's exciting. So I've been part of two, both based on my direct to customer experience. So Isabel Friedman, who I think very highly of, she's an entrepreneur and quite a force, I'm just going to say, to be reckoned with. But she had the idea as SPACs were getting more and more popular. She looked around and realized there were no all-female SPACs. So she put together a team of women who are great business people and just happen to be women, and went after the SPAC market. And I guess we all started down that path together. It was about a year ago at this time. And we've done sort of one in the technology space, and now we're working on a consumer as well.
Okay. Well, good luck with that. That's interesting. I'm going to have to do some more research on SPACs and how they play into our market. And now Baggallini, as I think I mentioned, I did not know the brand. My wife absolutely knew the brand, and she's like, "Wow, I love it." So tell us about it.
Yeah. So that's when I first got the call about Baggallini. I had actually never heard of it either. But I'm so glad that I did. It's a really exciting business, Mark. So Baggallini is a 6-year-old company. Our founders were two global travelers. They were flight attendants, actually, and partners. And from their travels around the globe for many, many years, gleaned a lot of great insights about what makes for an amazing bag. And if you think about it, travel is sort of the most extreme use case for a bag, right? I mean, if it is efficient enough and durable enough to stay with you through your travels, then it generally speaking, is an excellent bag for every day as well. The whole brand story, I think, is really terrific because these two women were very enterprising and scrappy in the way they built the business. And that's really part of the spirit of the brand now. And the idea was really to have bags and have a lot of very intuitive organization for women. And so what that's translated into is, first, the business took hold really in the alternatives travel space. So we were sort of the bag you took along with you on your travels, so your everyday bag for your global travels. And then we moved into the more pure travel space. But the lion's share of the handbag business, it's funny, again, handbags is a new experience for me too, is in everyday bags. And it's quite a joyful purchase for women to go and find a bag that really meets their needs. It's very interesting, culturally. Several years ago, the idea about a handbag was more about an it bag that defined you, right? By carrying around this bag, you affiliated with a brand and that defined who you were. Baggallini is not that. Baggallini is the bag that you carry because you've defined yourself. And it really is about giving you sort of a very, like an extra tool to carry around product with you. There's a lot of intuitive pocketing. Every bag is either antibacterial or machine washable or both. So it's a very hands-free way of living. I really also appreciate the last element, which is it's a value brand, right? So it provides customers a product that's really worth more than they pay for it. And it's accessible to a large group of customers. So we can actually support women to live their best life across any price point. So it's been a lot of fun.
Stores and your own stores as well as wholesale?
So actually, we have a couple partners that we do business with, but we do not own our own stores. They're licensed deals, which I think was actually really smart in the way the business was set up. So it gives a lot of flexibility. 70% of our business today, we trade online.
So strong digital business. Well, that's great.
Very strong digital business. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great to see brands that are focused on utility, as opposed to, status.
That's right.
Great stuff. Really appreciate your time. So when I end these shows, I have 7 questions that I like to ask folks.
Okay.
Kind of quick and dirty. First or second thing come into your mind. You ready?
Okay.
All right. A brand that you admire or that inspires you?
Apple.
The favorite app on your phone?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard one. My text app, I'd say. That's how I keep in touch with my daughter.
The last website other than Amazon and Baggallini that you shopped from?
Shopbop.
Okay. Something that you're not good at, but that you wish that you were?
I have realized I would really like to be a better artist than I am because I have to talk through all my ideas. And we just hired a new head of design, Alicia Skian, who's such a talented artist, is able to bring her ideas to life through art. I really admire that skill.
All right. Sketching. A charitable organization that you're passionate about?
Yeah, Dress for Success, actually. And also there's a suicide hotline, both set up by a classmate of mine from Brown, Nancy Loveland. And I think, both of those concepts, one, bringing a community and product to help women get back on their feet or to the next level in life is ingenious. And then I think this idea of the text hotline, having an outlet for people to get support very quickly when they need it in the moment, so critical in today's time. There's another organization called One Love, which Yardley Love was a lacrosse player. And unfortunately, she was the victim of relationship abuse and unfortunately lost her life to it. But as a result, her friends and family have set up a foundation that are really promoting education around healthy relationships, which if you think about it is something that no one teaches you when you're growing up. That's not a format in school, right? Plenty of sex ed conversation, but no education around healthy relationships. So I really support this organization and what they're trying to do and how that can build community. It's run by another friend of mine, Katie Hood.
Thank you for sharing that. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
I'd like to fly. No.
And last, other than family, what's your most prized possession?
Oh my gosh. What's more important than family? Nothing.
Maybe that puppy that's next to you now.
No, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say community. I live in a really amazing community that brings a lot of richness to my life. So very supportive. Everybody's there for each other. It's a terrific thing.
And maybe lastly now, where can people reach out to you on social media, Devon?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn, of course. So it's probably the best.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, really, thank you for doing this. It was nice to catch up with you. Hope we can stay
Me
in
too.
touch and see how things are progressing for you down the road at Baggallini. That's it. Today's game ball goes to Devon Pike for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, listen to your customers. That sounds simple, but there's so many brands that do not have the tools and processes in place to listen to what they're telling you. Devon spoke about the international business where blue denim was not nearly as popular as black denim, but the product availability did not match the need. They heard the customers tell them that they wanted black, so the business changed their product mix. Number 2, this one seems to come up pretty often. Changing your job is sometimes hard, but as you develop your career, pushing for change is important. Devon spoke about how she's moved towards roles that have helped round out her skill sets and experiences. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. And number 3, I like the comment about a balanced scorecard. And although that can be whatever you make it, do look at your business holistically and not just those few metrics that you've tended to use in the past. What you measure is what you get. So add to your standard financial measures, include operational metrics, customer engagement, and employee engagement metrics, so you have a more complete view of your performance. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter at DetailsInteract and learn more at detailsinteractive.com. Until next time, the devil is in the details.